Luce Irigaray's "To speak is never neutral" is a critical exploration of language, its philosophical underpinnings, and its socio-political implications, especially concerning gender and power. Through this collection of essays, Irigaray unpacks the relationship between language and subjectivity, highlighting how speech acts are never impartial or detached from cultural and ideological contexts. Her analysis bridges psychoanalysis, linguistics, philosophy, and feminist theory, making the work both multifaceted and profound. The text challenges readers to rethink the ways language structures power dynamics and marginalizes the feminine. At the heart of Irigaray's argument is the assertion that language is not neutral, but deeply embedded within systems of power and ideology. Traditional philosophical frameworks often present language as a transparent medium through which meaning is conveyed, assuming that words merely reflect reality. Irigaray dismantles this notion, demonstrating how language actively constructs reality and reinforces existing hierarchies, particularly those rooted in gender. By focusing on the patriarchal structures embedded in linguistic systems, she exposes how language has historically privileged male subjectivity while marginalizing or erasing female voices. She argues that language, as it is traditionally conceived and practiced, is shaped by a male-centered worldview that excludes or distorts female experience. This exclusion is not accidental, but structural, arising from the way linguistic and philosophical systems have been constructed to privilege the masculine as universal. Irigaray critiques figures like Freud and Lacan for their contributions to this framework, particularly in psychoanalytic theories of language and subject formation. While these theories provide valuable insights into the relationship between language and the unconscious, Irigaray contends that they remain trapped within a phallocentric logic that denies women their own subjectivity and agency. Irigaray's analysis extends beyond the content of language to its very form and structure. She examines how the rules of grammar, syntax, and logic reflect and reinforce hierarchical binaries, such as male-femme-object and active-passive. These binaries, she argues, are not neutral descriptors of reality, but ideological constructs that perpetuate the dominance of one term over the other. For instance, the masculine is often associated with activity, reason, and universality, while the feminine is relegated to passivity, emotion, and particularity. Irigaray challenges this dichotomy, advocating for a new linguistic framework that can accommodate the fluidity and multiplicity of female experience. Drawing on psychoanalysis, she examines how desire shapes and is shaped by linguistic structures, influencing how subjects relate to themselves and to others. In traditional frameworks, desire is often articulated through a male-centric lens, with the feminine positioned as the object of desire rather than a desiring subject in her own right. Irigaray critiques this dynamic, arguing that it reduces women to mere representations within a male-defined symbolic order. She calls for a rearticulation of desire that recognizes the agency and subjectivity of women, allowing for new modes of expression and relationality. Irigaray's engagement with psychoanalysis is both critical and transformative. While she critiques Freud and Lacan for their phallocentric assumptions, she also builds on their insights to develop her own theory of language and subjectivity. For example, she interrogates Latan's concept of the symbolic order, which he defines as the realm of language and culture that structures human experience, while Latan emphasizes the centrality of the phallus as the organizing principle of the symbolic order. Irigaray challenges this view, arguing that it excludes the feminine and imposes a male-centered logic on all subjects. She proposes an alternative vision of the symbolic that can accommodate sexual difference, creating space for the articulation of feminine subjectivity. She argues that the ways we speak and write shape our sense of self, our relationships with others, and our understanding of the world. For women whose voices have historically been marginalized or silenced, this connection is particularly significant. Irigaray emphasizes the importance of developing a new language that can express the specificity of female experience, allowing women to reclaim their subjectivity and agency. This is not simply a matter of adding women's voices to existing discourses, but of transforming the very structures of language to reflect and respect sexual difference. Irigaray's approach to language is deeply influenced by her engagement with phenomenology, particularly the work of Merleau-Ponty. Like Merleau-Ponty, Irigaray views language as embodied and relational, rooted in lived experience, and shaped by the interplay between self and other. However, she departs from Merleau-Ponty in her emphasis on the gendered dimensions of language, arguing that phenomenology has traditionally overlooked the ways in which sexual difference shapes linguistic and relational practices. By bringing a feminist perspective to phenomenology, Irigaray offers a more nuanced understanding of the relationship between language, embodiment, and subjectivity. While she critiques existing linguistic systems for their exclusion of the feminine, she also highlights the possibility of using language to disrupt and subvert these systems. Through poetic and experimental forms of writing, Irigaray seeks to challenge the linear, rationalist logic of traditional discourse, creating space for alternative ways of thinking and speaking. Her use of metaphor, imagery, and rhythm reflects her belief that language must be reinvented to express the fluidity, multiplicity, and relationality of human experience. Irigaray's work also has profound ethical and political implications. By exposing the ways in which language reinforces power dynamics and exclusion, she calls for a rethinking of how we communicate and relate to one another. For Irigaray, the recognition of sexual difference is not merely a theoretical concern, but an ethical imperative, requiring us to acknowledge and respect the otherness of others. This involves not only listening to marginalized voices, but also reimagining the structures of language and society to create space for genuine dialogue and reciprocity. To speak is never neutral. Irigaray also addresses the role of language in shaping cultural and social norms. She critiques the ways in which linguistic practices reinforce patriarchal values, perpetuating stereotypes, and limiting the possibilities for alternative ways of being. At the same time, she emphasizes the potential of language to resist and transform these norms, highlighting the power of speech and writing as tools for social change. By challenging dominant discourses and creating new modes of expression, Irigaray argues, we can begin to dismantle oppressive systems and build more inclusive and equitable communities.